For an entire generation of kids, John Stewart wasn't a Green Lantern, he was the Green Lantern. But despite his popularity outside of the comics, DC didn't seem to know what to do with him, which is a problem that he's been dealing with for decades. John Stewart has been the leader of the Green Lantern Corps, a guardian of the universe, a member of a rival group of space cops, and 3 different other colored lanterns. Bro, this dude once even had a ring that made him the commander of a legion of energy space zombies. But in recent years, John Stewart has ascended to full-on godhood, the Emerald Knight, who's powered by a galaxy-sized godstorm, and when his friends needed him most, he willingly sacrificed himself so that he could be the heart of the Green Lantern Corps itself. During his time as a god, John was easily the most powerful Green Lantern to have ever lived, and I want to tell you all about his rise and fall. Hello and welcome to Comic Drake, where I talk about comic books. My name is Drake. Let's talk about it. But before we get too far into things, I want to give a big thank you to the sponsor of today's video, Arena Club. It's no secret that I compete at my local card shop's tournaments every single week, and even though I'm pretty bad at the games, tearing into booster packs and making my deck stronger is one of the small joys in my life. Well, Arena Club takes that same fun of opening booster packs, but for graded cards. What I love is that everything is 100% transparent, because you get to see exactly which cards are available, along with the likelihood of pulling them before putting any money down whatsoever. And once you pull your card, you can have it shipped right to you. But if you would rather sell it, then Arena Club gives you an instant offer based on the estimated fair market value, or you can sell or trade on their digital marketplace. It's safe, easy, fair, and there is no scenario where you are walking away empty-handed. As a collector, I love Arena Club, and if you want to see for yourself, then you can get 20% off your first slab pack or card purchase by going to arenaclub.com/comicdrake and use my code ComicDrake. Once again, big thank you to Arena Club for sponsoring the video, but now let's get back to it. So back in 2019, Superman's son was like, hey, there needs to be the United Nations, but in space. And somehow, representatives from across the universe were like, that's a great idea, we've never thought of that. And just like that, the United Planets was formed. This was a huge step forward for intergalactic politics, but where does that leave these self-proclaimed guardians of the universe and their Green Lantern Corps? Well, they tried to adapt, restructuring the Corps around this new organization, and as a part of this, John Stewart was taken off of Earth and sent on a quest with a platoon of 1,000 other lanterns at his command. Their mission was to explore the dark sectors, pockets of space that the Guardians couldn't see into. But at the exact moment that the quest lanterns reached their destination, every single central power battery of every Lantern Corps explodes, and every lantern across the universe immediately lost their powers, including the ability to breathe in space. Luckily, John was near a mushroom lantern who cocooned his commander inside of a protective fungus, which allowed him to have a side quest where he fought off slavers and built a ship that could bring an entire doomed village to a Green Lantern stronghold. Waiting for him at the base was Lonar, the new god of journeys, whose job was to guide John towards his destiny. Lonar whisks Stewart back in time to a conflict between the Guardians and the New Gods, and it's there that Stewart is shot by a young Darkseid rocking some sick facial hair. But instead of it killing him, the energy caused him to ascend into a godlike being. This might seem like something that comes completely out of left field, but to understand what's going on and for why this ascension matters, we need to talk about the guy who has been writing everything that we've been talking about so far, Jeff Thorne. See, Thorne is a massive John Stewart fan, and in fact, this entire run of Green Lantern was originally pitched as a solo series for him, but DC liked this pitch so much, they told Jeff to just expand out the idea and make this the main Green Lantern book. One of Thorne's biggest goals for this comic was to reconcile John's forgotten lore, especially how for decades, DC has been ignoring one of the most important comics in all of John Stewart's history, Green Lantern Mosaic. I'm telling you, man, this comic is wild. Like, it ends with John eating his power ring and becoming a Guardian. The problem, though, is that the reason DC refuses to acknowledge that this comic exists is because it was written by Gerard Jones, who is unfortunately a convicted pedophile. Now look, it is totally understandable that DC would want to distance itself from such a horrible person, but it doesn't change the fact that this story is still a major part of John's history, and for as nice as it would be to forget that Gerard Jones ever existed and to sweep this comic under the rug, Jeff Thorne's run was greatly influenced by Mosaic, so it is important to this conversation. So, in order to help explain why the Mosaic comic is so important, let me turn it over to Mosaic Comics, the #1 Green Lantern channel on all of YouTube.
Green Lantern Mosaic is the story of what happens when you put a very troubled person on a journey of self-discovery in charge of what's probably the most diverse and chaotic planet in the universe. Entire cities from dozens of worlds were abducted by a renegade Guardian and transported to the planet Oa. The rest of the Guardians promised to return everyone home, but secretly they had a different plan. This patchwork Mosaic world would make the perfect test for John Stewart. See, unlike most Green Lanterns, John Stewart was handpicked to be a Lantern by the Guardians themselves. This is because the Guardians recognized John's potential to develop into something more than human, though they kept all of that a secret from everyone, including John himself. The Guardians knew that John could eventually ascend to a higher level, and learning how to handle the powers and responsibilities of a Green Lantern was the first stage of John's training. The next step was putting him in charge of maintaining order on the Mosaic, a job that required John to oversee dozens of complicated societies. Protecting the Mosaic world forced John to act as the guardian of a small-scale representation of a diverse universe, while also coming to terms with his own insecurities about his cultural identity and place in the world. John was the only authority figure on the Mosaic, as well as being one of the only humans, and that caused him to question everything from his own sanity to what it meant to be part of a society. He had all these lingering doubts about his place in the Green Lantern Corps, since the existence of Hal Jordan means that many people will always see John as a lower tier alternate. Those doubts are compounded by the fact that spending so much time away from Earth makes John feel guilty, like he's rejecting his roots in favor of embracing a job where he'll always exist in the shadow of a more popular white hero. And all of that is in addition to John's unresolved feelings concerning his wife, Green Lantern Kat Matui, who died tragically years earlier. But the longer he lived on this chaotic world, the more he began to feel that there was a rhythm to it. All of these populations that were never meant to blend together were learning how to coexist. It was very often a violent and scary process, with more than its fair share of dead ends, misunderstandings, and xenophobia to throw everything into doubt. But in the end, it all started coming together. The cities of the Mosaic world were becoming something new, an amalgamation of cultures never before seen anywhere in the universe. And John's own development followed that example. He had struggled for so long with the fact that he was made up of all of these incompatible pieces, but helping the Mosaic find harmony taught John that there's beauty in being made of contradictions, that inconsistencies don't make him lesser, they just make him a person. The final issue of Green Lantern Mosaic is famous for the scene where John swallows his Green Lantern ring and becomes a guardian of the universe, something that doesn't make a lot of sense if you take it literally, but symbolically, it's perfect. John has already come to terms with everything inside of him. All that was left was his role as a lantern, symbolized by his ring, which was made to always be worn on the outside. So he swallowed it in a symbolic gesture to show his total acceptance of his identity. Green Lantern isn't a ring that can be taken off. It's a part of him. It's a light that exists within him. That was the last piece John was missing to finally ascend, just as the Guardians expected. Which is why it's such a shame that DC immediately threw all of this away. 2 months after Mosaic ended, the main Green Lantern series began its Emerald Twilight storyline that reset the whole franchise, getting rid of both the Guardians and the Green Lantern Corps so that newcomer Kyle Rayner would be the one and only Green Lantern. And John's powers just suddenly vanished with no explanation. John would eventually become part of Kyle's supporting cast, and everything about his experience on the Mosaic world would be glossed over and forgotten. It would get referenced a few times, with the most notable example being a conversation John had with Kyle in Green Lantern number 70, but that's pretty much the last time this incredibly important period of John's life would come up until Jeffrey Thorne came along decades later. But I'll let Drake finish telling you all about that.
Thanks, Mosaic. Yeah, it's no surprise that Jeff Thorne used Green Lantern Mosaic as the background of this story, because John's journey of ascension had already been mapped out decades earlier. So now, guided by Lonar, Stewart and the Quest Lanterns are up against a rogue new god named Isak, who is killing folks and stealing their life energy to craft his own pantheon of new gods the way that he wants them to be. See, the new gods are fundamental aspects of the DC multiverse, and it's no secret that said multiverse has been changed multiple times over its nearly 100 years of publication. I understand that DC Comics might seem really complicated from the outside, but it's really not that bad. There have only been 2 reboots ever. But even outside of the reboots, DC still tinkers with the multiverse, and every time they do that, the new gods get modified as well because they are aspects of the multiverse. Look, Isak's plan was to essentially create a new pantheon of new gods, but they're like old new gods because they're back how he wanted them to be. What matters is that people were dying for the Mad God's plan, so John blows up the heart of Isak's operation, which accidentally created a volatile godstorm made of pure source energy, the same force that forms and powers all of creation. To keep from tearing through the fabric of reality, John uses his newly ascended powers to absorb the Godstorm into himself. And boy howdy, if you thought that Stewart was strong before, this Godstorm energy powered him up to an even higher level, literal god tier. There was no time to celebrate though, because while the Quest Lanterns were dealing with all this divine nonsense, the rest of the Green Lantern Corps were fighting for their lives elsewhere. With his newly heightened senses, John was able to feel the danger that his friends are in, and he instantly teleports over to punch the bad guy square in the face. But this gave Isak the perfect chance to escape and live to fight another day. John's back-to-back battles had him expend so much energy that he transcended physical space entirely, entering into the source itself, where it manifests an avatar in the shape of Jack Kirby to have a philosophical chat with him. It is such an incredible scene, dude. Like, not only does this make it the 3rd comic universe where the King of Comics is depicted as the capital G God, but John becomes so transparent that we don't just see the white paper that the comic is printed on. It goes a step further by showing us the original comic borders that the images were first drawn on, complete with those blue borders. Using the power of the source, John crafts a brand new central power battery made out of pure source energy, and the shockwaves of its creation instantly repairs all of the damaged buildings and infrastructure around it. With this new battery and giving lanterns access to the energy of creation itself, Stewart didn't just rebuild Oa, he rebuilt the entire idea of what the Green Lantern Corps could be. And for himself, John assumed his final form as the Emerald Knight, opting to not take a power ring and return back to the Dark Sectors to finish off Isak once and for all. This was a part of Jeff Thorne's big plan for the Green Lantern comic, to modify most of the human lanterns into something new and unique that could take them away from the Corps. Not only would this let each of the lanterns stand on their own, but it makes being a Green Lantern more special in the process, since there aren't, 7 of them from Earth running around at the same time. Sadly though, Thorne was only able to complete 1/3 of his planned stories, as he got kneecapped by the Dark Crisis event, causing the Green Lantern comic to be cancelled and forcing him to wrap up John's story in a single one-shot. John Stewart, the Emerald Knight, has a lot to try and wrap up with just a single issue. It jumps 2 years into the future, where the Quest Lanterns have become John's Emerald Guard, and he powers them with his own independent god energy. They're trying to defeat Isak once and for all, but the problem is that he's too powerful, as Isak is exploiting a sort of cosmic loophole. See, the new gods are supposed to pick a specialty and be the god of something, which gives them an absurd amount of power over that one thing, but it limits their other abilities in other ways. Isak, though, simply refuses to be tied down, so as a result, he's too strong to be defeated with just brute force. So with John being John, he comes up with a clever solution. Stewart pulls a duplicate of himself out of hypertime, and they combine their powers together to hold down Isak just long enough to ask him a simple question. What are you the god of? In that moment, Isak couldn't deny it. He was desperate for control and for things to go back to the good old days that he preferred. Like it or not, Isak is the god of nostalgia. He remembers it, so we won't have to. With his role having now been defined, the Johns overpower him. But what makes this such a cool resolution is that John didn't defeat Isak by punching him with a giant green boxing glove or shooting him with a laser beam. No. John is an architect. He won by building Isak into something better, accomplishing one of the rarest things in all of mainstream superhero comics. He overpowered nostalgia and the corporate desire to bring things back to the status quo. Now, this is the part where you'd think that the other Emerald Knight would just return home and we'd move on as if nothing ever happened, but in a bold move, he doesn't. No, the Source just splits his god power amongst the Johns, with the original opting to stay within the Dark Sectors to live a life with his newly resurrected wife. Don't worry about it. While the Hypertime duplicant went back to Earth as the main John Stewart of the DC universe. But instead of letting Jeff Thorne pick up where he left off after Dark Crisis, John's story was handed over to Philip Kennedy Johnson, who had this to say.
I remember Jeff saying, one day, John's going to leave and never be a Lantern again. I'm like, that's adorable, but he's a character at DC Comics, and the ring is never going to be done with him. And I was thinking about that. I was thinking, well, what would that be like in real life if you decide, I'm retiring, and then something happens, and the ring is not done with you? And I wanted to see what that would look like.
But this is so much more than just retiring from a simple job. What is it like to live as a mere mortal once you've been a god? Hell, even at half power, John still is a god. And yet here he is, stuck at a red light, just like the rest of us. I don't know about you, but I would be busting out my powers if I were in John's shoes here, especially if I had to deal with an asshole truck driver that is honking at me the moment the light turns green. But while John was away, things had changed. The Green Lantern Corps isn't the independent peacekeeping organization that it once was. It's now run by a council of United Planets representatives, led by a man named Tharos. And if that wasn't enough, the space sector that includes Earth has been quarantined off from the rest of the universe in hopes that all the big-ass comic events that keep popping up like once a year, they thought maybe they could just keep that contained on planet Earth. Good luck with that. But you know what? Maybe this was exactly the sign that John needed to take a step back. See, his mom has always been his hero. In her prime, John's mother was a political activist who stood up for what she believed in no matter the odds, even if it meant that she got arrested. And Stewart has been known to go on and on and on about how his ring should have chosen her. But unfortunately, she's suffering from dementia in her old age, and John moved back home to take care of her. Yeah, it's frustrating to get caught in traffic, but at least with his powers, John does have the ability to fly away if he wants to. But here, there's nothing he can do. Stewart just has to live with it, to spend these last few moments enjoying his time with his mother, doing everything around the house by hand, like fixing the plumbing and tending to her garden. But there's one exception. When John's mother gets lost in delusions, believing that his long-dead sister was alive and well, he can't help himself, and John makes a construct of her so that she can live out these moments in peace, even if it pains him to see his mother slip further and further. This use of his powers drew the attention of the Green Lantern Corps, who sent a new lantern named Varan to Earth to investigate Stewart for the unlawful possession of a power ring, which he didn't have. But when Varan tried to bind John in chains, he let him know exactly who he was and what he was capable of, punching Varan so hard that he shattered the frame of the comic itself. And after that, things spiraled fast, because right after he was defeated, Varan was killed and turned by space zombies called the Radiant Dead, led by a multiversal threat called the Revenant Queen, who was aiming to wipe out the strongest John Stewart in the multiverse. Zombie Varan was able to stab John with his blade, infecting Stewart with their condition, and to make things worse, using his Emerald Knight powers accelerated its spread. In order to bypass this, John had to get creative. He salvages Varan's ring, which was fully cut off from the central power battery when he was killed, and by hooking it up to a new power source, John Stewart was back in ring-slinging action. To watch over his mother while he was gone, John pushed his abilities further than they've ever been pushed before, not just creating a simple construct of his sister, but instead a fully autonomous copy of her to keep their mother safe and sound. And when I say autonomous, I mean that she is a straight-up living creature, to the point where this living Green Lantern construct was later able to become a Blue Lantern because comics, but I'm getting ahead of myself. Once upon a time, there was a multiversal god named Olgren, and he loved his daughter more than life itself. He hated to be away from her, so as a gift, his daughter made him the Dark Star Ring, a device that could teleport her to wherever he might be in the universe so they would never have to be apart for long. I swear to God, this is still a John Stewart video, just please bear with me. Knowing that his daughter was his weakness, the other gods who were jealous of his strength tricked Olgren into killing her, but instead of keeling over in despair, Olgren went mad and nearly destroyed all of creation. The rest of the gods were eventually able to kill Olgren and divide his aspects into items of power, like the ring that his daughter made him all those years ago. Now, officially, the Dark Star Ring is the embodiment of Olgren's will, but if you really stop to think about it, this ring embodies so much more than that. It's his guilt, his grief, and his desperate need to hold on to what he's lost, which is why the Revenant Queen takes on the form of his daughter as the living embodiment of his inability to let go. This and the Revenant Queen forcing the ring out of John's hand in an attempt to overwrite his essence entirely to resurrect her father embodies the exact same themes as Isak and his deadly nostalgia. Holding so tightly onto what was and not moving on can be toxic. like how John keeps feeding his mother's delusions by manifesting his long-departed sister and keeping her immersed in a lie of how things used to be. Hey, story themes. Eventually, Stewart realizes that he also has great will, and with the Dark Star Ring in his disposal, he could turn the tables and command the Radiant Dead for himself, which he uses to seal them away and the Revenant Queen inside of a necropolis. When he returns to Earth, John discovers that Varen was tormenting his poor sick mother out of revenge for Stewart kicking his ass in the first couple of issues, and what's worse is that she was infected with the zombie virus as well. But this time, John had the ring, and he was able to cure her. But the virus, combined with the stress of Varen's torture, had put her body through so much, and like it or not, this was her time to pass. John refuses, desperate to hold on to just a few moments more, but his mother looks at him and says that he needs to let her go. So he absorbs her soul into his power ring, and now it's his AI, which more or less undermines the themes of clinging to the past that have been building up over these stories. God damn it, I have been working my ass off to have this be a good emotional through line for the video, and yeah, it's super sweet and heartwarming that this is where the story went, but why couldn't you just let her die for me, John? Why weren't you thinking about my stupid little YouTube video when you decided to have your mom with you at all times? Damn it. So remember Tharos? He was the dude that was put in charge of the Green Lantern Corps by the United Planets. Well, turns out he was super evil and is trying to assert power for himself, so he gets his hands on the Dark Star Ring and blows up the central power battery that Stewart had just rebuilt like a couple of years prior. Luckily though, the Guardians had stashed a spare one over on Earth, which the Green Lantern used to defeat Tharos, and then they decided they were going to be nice guys and rebuild the batteries of all the other cores. The problem though is that no matter how hard they tried, these new batteries wouldn't ignite. So John, being a real stand-up guy, gave his life, using his Emerald Knight powers to bring them all online. But hey, remember how the John that we've been following this whole time was actually the Hypertime duplicate? Well, when he died, the soul of John's mom, who is still inside of his ring, flies off to the Dark Sectors to tell her original son that it's time to come home. And that brings us to the most recent Green Lantern comics at the time of this recording. Okay, look. I know that I don't sound too excited here, and it's because I'm kind of not. It's all really unsatisfying, right? Yes, this is the original John Stewart, but he's missing everything that happened to him recently that made his story so powerful. He is not the one that fought the Radiant Dead. He is not the one that was living with his mom during her final moments. Yes, the loose ends of there being two Johns has officially been resolved, but everything involving his mother and sister was so emotionally powerful that it sucks that basically that essentially didn't happen. God, John was given so much great character development, and now you're telling me that all of that is just being swept under the rug and they're going to revert him back to a previous version? It's like Mosaic all over again, but at least this time there's a less controversial reason to move on from it. And I swear to God, if John has to rebuild a central power battery one more time, I'm starting a GoFundMe for the dude to take a damn vacation. You can get started today by going to patreon.com/trailerdrake. I'll make sure he gets it. Look, this video has been all over the place, and thank you so much for watching, and especially a big thank you to Mosaic Comics for helping out with it. Seriously, you need to go check out his channel. It has everything Green Lantern related that you would ever want. But anyway, I hope you learned at least a little something new, and hopefully I'll see you next time.